covers the countryside. And we see that in this type of just a basic linear flow here in the Columbia River basalts. You can just see where this lava has come out through a whole series of fractures, just pouring out one basaltic lava flow after the next, building up just a few feet at a time. And here's the Snake River that cuts down through the Snake River plain right here. And you can just see one thin flow after another, all covering Washington, Montana, Idaho, most of Oregon, down into Northern California, Nevada. Huge, giant flows of basaltic lava, low viscosity lava. Instead of being a radial form like a shield volcano, like a Mauna Loa, now it's this big blanket form that covers the area as what we call a fissure flow. Okay, let's kind of take a look then at the next thing, what we call composite cones. Now we're looking at Mount St. Helens and Mount Rainier. We get an eruption, it starts to flow lava, then the vent plugs off. Sometimes the pressure builds up, we get another vent where lava is flowing, but then the pressure really blows up, blows that plug out. We get pyroclastic debris all over, and then it plugs off, then we get some lava. So this cone is building up right around the local area. Sometimes it's pyroclastic debris, sometimes it's lava flow, sometimes it's another layer of debris. It's here, there, it's this side. So we're getting what we call a composite cone because it's compositionally basalt, flow, and pyroclastic debris. This is Mount St. Helens, Mount Baker, Mount Rainier, all the Cascade Range along the west coast. These also occur all over the place in Italy, and over there they call them something different. They call them stratovolcanoes just because they like to use different terms. So Mount Vesuvius, which you've probably all heard of, that wiped out Pompeii, that was a big composite volcano. Mount Pele, Martinique, Santorini, Tambora, Krakatoa, Mount St. Helens, all these big famous volcanoes are all composite type volcanoes, very explosive. And what we've done in this case to make them explosive is we've moved from the ultramafic basaltic compositions, we've added some silica. And we haven't gone to the felsic end, we're in the middle. We're at the andesite end of things, right in the middle. So remember, andesite was the fine-grained aphanitic intermediate composition material. So here I am at andesite. And it kind of makes sense for being a composite volcano, because sometimes it has just a little more silica in it and acts more toward the felsic end and plugs up and becomes pyroclastic. Other times it warms up a little bit, it moves a little more toward the basalt side, and it acts like a basaltic shield volcano. And it just kind of waffles back and forth in the middle there. So that's why I'm getting this compositional nature to it. You can see here's this Mount Shasta in Northern California. Still looks pretty good, doesn't it? That's sort of what Mount St. Helens used to look like until it erupted in 1980. And look at how it not only blew the top of the volcano off, but blew out the whole side of the volcano. And you can see everything's just covered in volcanic ash. Kind of almost looks like you're standing on the moon, doesn't it? Okay, let's go take a look at cinder volcanoes. This is kind of a famous one near Flagstaff, Arizona. It's Sunset Volcano. There's a whole field of these little cinder cones out there. And they're a great place for tourists to go kind of check out volcanoes. But here's one that occurred back in 1943, in the middle of the Second World War. And its eruption was actually seen. There was a farmer out in his field behind the mule, putting in the crop, and he looked at one end of the field and he thought that he saw something hopping around. He thought, oh my God, we got locusts. He was all upset. And he kind of finished off toward that end of the field, the furrow back to the other end of the field, looked back, and all of a sudden there was a hill there. And it wasn't locusts, it was the beginnings of the cinder cone, and you can see where it's grown. Notice very steep sides, fairly small, local, but Pericutine was probably the classic cinder cone volcano. And you can also see that, again, it had kind of some lava associated with it that blew out at the base, and it came through the local town. But notice it's very viscous lava, just like you would expect to go with a viscous felsic type of cone. And that's what we see here. We already talked about this guy up front, so I'm not going to make you sit through that again. And now if we go to the very extreme and go to the felsic end of things, we're going to go to rhyolite, aren't we? And now we're looking at pretty serious felsic material, and now it's really getting gooey. This is Mount St. Helens after it erupted. And now this is what's forming there. It's a rhyolite plug. So the composition now has gone from andesite, it's gotten more felsic, and it's become rhyolitic, and now it's so gooey that it's plugging up the vents. You can see how it's all blown out. Here's the side that's completely disappeared. And you can see this rhyolite plug inside the volcano. And it moves up and down with the gas pressure. And the USGS monitors this thing all the time. And about 6 years ago, in one day, the plug rose about 300 feet. And the USGS went, uh-oh, eruption time, next one's coming. And they evacuated everybody from the area. People were not happy campers. They don't like to do that. And the next day it went down, the next day it came up, and for 2 weeks it just kind of bounced around, and then it settled down about where it started. So they let everybody back in. And it's been kind of playing that game for the last 4 or 5 years. So we've got this rhyolite plugging up the vent, pressure builds up, somehow gets bled off a little bit, and it's kind of saying, well, it's just a matter of time before this is going to blow again. It's on about a 150-year cycle. Last time was 1980, so we're not there yet, are we? But you just never know. And when you see a whole dome move up 300 feet in a day, it kind of catches your attention. So, is this a good area to live? It's a pretty area. It's a neat area. But, you know, it's probably comes with a few risks. Huh? So if you think about it, we can look at the style of volcano and the shape of the dome, and we can relate that directly to the material that made it. The more shield-like, the lower the viscosity, the lower the gas content. As we move with more viscosity, it's going to start to plug things up. We have gas content and viscosity. We're going to get cinder cones, and kind of in between, we're going to get composite cones. So it just makes a lot of sense that the lava type and the way we can classify it on the igneous classification scheme and the type of volcano that we're going to end up with, you can connect all those dots and see how one leads to the other. So if you know one thing, you know everything. Okay. Let's just catch a couple terms. We've got 5 more minutes. Do a couple terms, and then we'll call it quits. You've probably all heard the term a volcano crater, right? That's kind of the general term. How many have heard the term volcano caldera? Just a couple. They're very different. Volcanic craters are like we see here in this sunset sunset volcano near Flagstaff, cinder cone volcano. What's a crater here is this gas vent in the middle that was kept open by the high gas pressure blowing the material out of the vent. So it was built during the construction of the cone. It's a constructional type of feature. A caldera, on the other hand, is something like this, and this is Crater Lake, Oregon. Shouldn't it be Caldera Lake? Well, that would be the appropriate name, but nobody knows the name Caldera. So in the 1800s, when they were building the great lodges out in the west, in the vast park areas and everything, an entrepreneur built a lodge back here on the rim of the lake, and he started to advertise it to get tourists to come out and enjoy the vista and give them some money to stay at the lodge. And he discovered very quickly that when he said it was Caldera Lake, nobody knew what he was talking about. But when he said it was Crater Lake, everybody thought it was cool to be on the edge of a volcano. So he named the area Crater Lake, and the name stuck, despite the fact that geologically, that's not what it is at all. It's a caldera. So what's a caldera? Well, a caldera is actually just the opposite of a crater. Instead of being a constructional form, it's a destructional form. Here we have this giant volcanic composite cone, so it's pyroclastic and flow. The magma chamber's emptying, and as the magma chamber begins to empty and we build this big giant cone on top of this volcanic chamber, well, how are you going to support all that weight? That's not a problem when the chamber is full of magma, but you drain the magma out to build the cone on top, and eventually you're going to get to a point where that empty caldera or empty cauldron simply can't support the weight you built on top of it, and the crater, the cone, collapses down into the empty cauldron. So what you end up with now is kind of the remnants of the outer part of the cone, and you end up with a low where everything's collapsed down in, and that eventually fills with water, and you get Caldera Lake, Oregon. So, let me go back just a moment. So notice out here in the middle of the lake is Wizard Island. Kind of looks like a volcano, doesn't it? And that's because it is. This is an active volcano. It is growing, and it is basically the old caldera or old cauldron down here venting more magma, and the cone is starting to rebuild over geologic time. Okay, one more thing to talk about here. That's where we'll pick it up on